Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker was never a game that I expected to get a remaster as early as it did. Growing up, I always heard a lot of criticism for this game because of its art style and several frustrating mechanics regarding gameplay. However, we got a remaster for Wind Waker in 2013, but on the stinking Wii U. I often talk about how remasters preserve a game's legacy for the next generation. However, Wind Waker HD is a bit of an odd case in that it is stuck on the Wii U. What good does a remaster do for future generations if it's exclusively on a console that is obscure and sold really poorly during its life? See, a lot of people have this, and many versions of this can play GameCube games. Not many people have this, but this can play Wind Waker HD. So do you absolutely need to play the HD remake? Well, today we're going to answer the question, is Wind Waker on the GameCube obsolete? First and foremost, I need you to hit that subscribe button. We just hit the huge milestone of 1,000 subscribers, but let's keep it going. So here's to 1,000 more. Thank you for your support. So to answer our major question, we must take a look at the GameCube version itself and see if it's still fun to play. What you're seeing is my most recent playthrough of it, and the short answer is yes. I still absolutely love this game, and it's still really fun, even knowing that there is a superior version out there. In case you're wondering, I did a minimal side questing run for the gameplay you're seeing. Not a 3-heart run by any means, but a minimal run, if you will. I still ended up getting a few upgrades here and there to make things a smidge easier on me, but overall not much. For example, upon heading to Windfall Island for the first time, there's a lot that can be done. Instead, I just made a beeline for the sail and then was off to Dragon Roost. Wind Waker has a ton of side questing, and a lot of it is pretty interesting since you get to explore the Great Sea and all of its little islands. I've never come anywhere close to 100% completion of this game actually, as it's fairly massive. For the most part here then, we're going to stick to just discussing the gameplay of the main storyline.
I want to just clarify that I made about 90% of this video before the day that the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct happened. And well, they announced that Wind Waker was going to be ported to the Switch on Nintendo Switch Online. However, that means it's the GameCube version because it's going to be a part of the GameCube library. It's not a port of Wind Waker HD like we've all wanted. So now the question becomes more and more relevant. Is it worth playing the GameCube version? Because perhaps now the Wii U remake is going to be stuck on the Wii U forever, as they might say, okay, well, you can play Wind Waker on the Switch. We'll see if the HD version ever gets ported, but for now, we are mostly all going to be playing the GameCube version, it looks like.
Well, let's start from the beginning. We have some cutscenes that give us the backstory and all that mumbo jumbo. So if you're new here, I've covered a lot of games and things like the Mega Man series previously. I really enjoy a lot of the action. I'm not typically one for cutscenes. When I was a kid, the intro to Wind Waker felt like it took years. Nowadays, I let it run, go wash some dishes or something, and then come back when the game actually starts. We have a pretty slow opening in general. Just learning our way around this island until we notice a girl gets dropped in the woods. As we go save her, our own sister gets kidnapped. Then we team up with the pirates who were looking for the first girl, and we set sail to save our sister. This whole sequence is pretty much a tutorial with some story thrown in. Screwing around on these platforms to get the spoils bag teaches us the, ropes. After that, we are sent to the Forsaken Fortress. Next, the stealth aspect of the game is taught to us here, and I'm glad this is pretty much the only heavy emphasis on stealth. It's just not for me. I have very little experience with things like the Metal Gear franchise, and I've never been too keen on stealth. Several Zelda games try to have these mechanics, and they just never go too well for me. I'm always looking forward to the next stages here in Dragon Roost and Windfall Island when stuck in the Forsaken Fortress. Dragon Roost Cavern made me realize that Wind Waker has a lot of fun ways to interact with environments and enemies. We do things like cut these ropes to make a bridge fall, roll onto a wall to make a pot fall that has an enemy in it, and throw a flaming stick across a gap to burn a wall. It's little things like this that make Wind Waker very special, regardless of what version you're playing then. On Dragon Roost Island, we acquire the Wind Waker. Just like that, huh? Yeah, it's a bit anticlimactic given the game's title, but it is just handed to us here. We learn the Wind's Requiem, which is required to change the direction of the wind, and is necessary to be played about 74,853 times before completing the game. Yeah, it's a big criticism of the GameCube version to have to do it constantly, and you will be doing it a lot, even in a minimal run like I did. In defense, it's something you can just deal with and get used to, but I understand it's really annoying for some people. Also, yeah, the time it takes to sail certain places can be pretty long. They tried their best to make it interesting with some little things to do or look at while you're out at sea, but ultimately, yeah, it's pretty boring. I'll be honest, some of this script was written while sailing. Just let that controller sit while the game plays itself. In modern times, there's always ways to distract yourself while doing the slow sailing segments, but that's indicative of a huge flaw within the game. You definitely don't want to be pulling out your cell phone while playing a game. Don't worry, we will get to how the HD remake improved upon this, but just stay with me now for the GameCube. Our next destination is the Forbidden Woods. We meet the Great Deku Tree and learn that one of the Koroks needs saving. We are officially in our second dungeon, and I have the same praise for it as I do for the first one. The items in this game are just incredibly fun to use. We get the boomerang here, and the boss lets us take full advantage of it. There's almost nothing more fun than quickly highlighting 5 targets at a time and letting that thing fly. Next, we get a decent break in the action. I've not explicitly stated it yet, but the first phase of the game is to find 3 pearls. We get Din's Pearl from Prince Kamali and Dragon Roost, Ferore's Pearl from the Great Deku Tree, and then Nehru's Pearl from Jaboon. However, we don't need to go through a dungeon for this 3rd pearl. Instead, we get some more funny cutscenes of the pirates torturing a corrupt businessman, and we take a trip back to our hometown. I will give this game credit. There's a fair amount of comedic relief that still really hits home, even though I know it's coming and I've played the game so many times. Back on Outset Island, it's optional, but you can give your grandmother a fairy and you get one of the most heartwarming cutscenes ever, and your reward is the elixir soup, which is really good. It heals you, doubles your attack power until you take damage, and restores your magic. I'll be honest, I've never used potions in this game because I just always go for the soup. Once we finish all that, we put the pearls in their respective places, and look at that, they make a little triangle on my map. I wonder if that's important. Then we head to probably my favorite dungeon in the whole game, the Tower of the Gods. That is, of course, after we get yet another hilarious scene of Link smacking into a building. Sure, this dungeon is a bit annoying because you have to wait for the water to move up and down. However, that's only in the beginning part. What I appreciate the most about the tower is the way that it made me think at a young age. I really enjoy things like using the command melody and controlling other characters to solve rooms that involve pressing a switch and crossing a bridge. When you're a little kid, figuring out something like that makes you feel like a genius. Also, we get our first encounter here with Darknuts. This is where I'll add that Wind Waker's combat is immensely fun and largely improved over the N64 counterparts. You can, though I don't find much use for it, pick up the weapons that your enemies use and use them yourself. Also, the parry ability is pretty much essential for fighting Darknuts, and it feels really cool every time you pull this off. So after fighting the Darknut, we get the bow and arrow and can make our way through the rest of the dungeon. The boss here is pretty cool, but he's also kind of lame because he literally has to hand us arrows, and it's pretty forced. However, with all this talk about us being the chosen one, it's obvious that he wants us to win anyway. I know Nintendo does similar bosses to this one in a lot of other games as well, so, like I said, he's cool, but he's also a little bit lame. Alright, so now the game really begins. We go down under the water to Hyrule, and we finally snag the Master Sword. This is followed by one of the longer combat sections in the game, and I find this part to also be a peak for me. There's nothing like fighting 8 Darknuts in one room and getting to really see all the game's fighting mechanics at once. You got enemies hitting each other, you're picking up their weapons, parrying, it's all there. However, it's now time to finally go save our sister. We return to the Forsaken Fortress to finish the job. First, we have an encounter with Phantom Ganon, a great boss fight. We play some tennis with him, and our reward is the Skull Hammer. Now it's time to scale the fortress once again. We have another run-in with the pirates who take our sister to safety, but we aren't done yet. So we have to go fight the giant bird from the beginning of the game, and we can finally defeat him. Then we get one of the most important cutscenes in the entire game. Our initial goal of saving our sister is complete, but we learn that Tetra the pirate is actually Zelda the princess. We then return to Hyrule, learn that the King of Red Lions was the King of Hyrule all along, and we get a new set of goals. The Master Sword has lost its power, it needs to be restored. We need to reassemble the Triforce of Courage and then defeat Ganon once and for all. You got that? Good, because that's the rest of the game. After our second stint in Hyrule, we need to acquire the fire and ice arrows. That is done by warping to the Mother and Child Islands, and we get kind of a creepy cutscene. Now, I don't know if the game does something to really tell you that you need to warp here specifically, but when I was a kid I could never figure this part out. I think some of my earliest visits to GameFAQs ever included a search for how to get fire and ice arrows in Wind Waker. It was at this time I also decided to get all the upgrades for the wallet. We are really going to need them badly in a bit, but not necessarily right now. I got a few other upgrades in this time, like more bombs, arrows, and the double magic meter, which is really important. Again, I'm doing very minimal side objectives here, but these bonuses make the ending phases of the game much more manageable. We then snag the necessary items to enter the temples, the power bracelet and the iron boots. Next we can attempt to enter the Earth Temple, but after we conduct the song we need to find the sage of the temple. This sage is none other than Medley from Dragon Roost Island. We get some cutscenes and yada yada yada, and then it's off to the first of the two temples. Again, I have to praise the way the game makes us think. Having control over two characters for an entire dungeon is actually really fun. We got our feet wet by controlling the statues in the Tower of the Gods, but now we have a second character the whole time. The best room in the dungeon, and certainly the most memorable, is the one right before you get the boss key with all the mirrors. We set it to W for Wumbo, and then the whole room gives us a great sense of accomplishment once we're done. The boss for the Earth Temple is very easy to fight, especially if you go get the Hurricane Spin beforehand, which I didn't do, but even without it he's pretty light work. Because he's giant, it isn't hard to throw him into the spiked pillars, and then it's just a matter of time before you take care of all the Poes that split off. Upon completion of the Earth Temple, the Master Sword gets some of its power back, but we need to go locate the next sage. Believe it or not, it's our little tree friend, Makar, who we saved from the Forbidden Woods. We can find him practicing his violin in this secret area back in Forest Haven. Equipped with the next song for our Wind Waker, we can enter the game's final major dungeon, the Wind Temple. So you've stuck with me for coverage of pretty much the entire game so far, and this whole time, most of what I've been saying is present on the GameCube and the Wii U version. I've never really thought to myself while playing this game, oh man, I'm so upset that I'm playing on the GameCube version, I really need to go get a Wii U. So yeah, again, my whole description of all of this and why I'm going through the entire game is basically a long-winded way of me saying, yes, the GameCube version is fun. Don't worry, we will compare the two later, but just stick with me for now as we have a game to finish. First off, we need to acknowledge how amazing it is that Makar rides on the top of the King of Red Lions' head when we travel. I don't think I ever actually noticed that prior to this playthrough. The Wind Temple is not quite as fun for me as the Earth Temple, since it's a little more frustrating in design. There's basically one giant vertical hub area, and it can be a pain to climb up and down. Sure, the hookshot's always a fun item, but doing this can get old, in the way that the temple's designed. Also, Makar is a bit awkward to control when we do need to use him, and I think Medley is a lot easier and more fun to use. Don't get me wrong, I like the Wind Temple for a lot of reasons as well. I think the aesthetic, including the music, is really great, and the combination of the hookshot plus the iron boots making Link able to topple statues is a cool idea. We also finally get some decently challenging combat situations. Rooms with multiple Dark Nuts and Wizrobes are no joke compared to what we've seen so far. This temple's boss is fascinating as well, especially with how the center of the floor shifts. However, the targeting system kinda ruins it. It's so easy to lock onto the little pups when you're trying to hit the main dude, and it can cause you to make some unintentional moves for sure. Otherwise, it's definitely an interesting boss fight, and certainly one that's memorable. Now that we've defeated all the temples, we are on to the last major phase of the game. With the temples completed, it's time to assemble the Triforce of Courage. This is where the game takes a severe downturn for a lot of people. We need to find 8 charts which tell us where the Triforce is. I haven't really talked about it, but charts are a huge part of the exploration in this game, especially for finding pieces of heart and such for 100% completion. However, the Triforce charts need to be deciphered by stupid Tingle. I kept him in the jail cell for the entire game until I needed the charts deciphered because He deserves it. This dude charges a whopping 398 rupees per chart, and there's 8. So that means you need just under 3,200 rupees to complete the game. The fact that it's 398 and not just 400 even really drives home how arbitrary this number is, and they could have just made it something like 100 to make this a lot more tolerable. But no, 398 it is. There's some strategies for grinding rupees, and I took advantage of one that you can use in the Wind Temple. However, I got pretty close from just never really spending rupees in the game and making sure I got the wallet upgrades fairly early. I mean, when you kill enemies in this game, you can get quite a few. The charts are located on some islands that are in fairly remote parts of the game. This is what I like about the quest. If this quest wasn't in the game, then the Great Sea would just be this kind of anomaly of an overworld that serves little purpose outside of side questing. I mean, you can warp to pretty much all of the essential islands whenever you want once you get that song, and there's only really like 5 or 6 that truly matter for the story. But the Great Sea is giant in its full scale. So getting the Triforce requires us to explore a little more, and that is a good thing. Acquiring the charts sometimes involves combat. These are also kind of boring. We don't get any new enemies in this segment really, and you just fight room after room of the same stuff you've seen in the temples. This again makes the quest feel more like just an endgame chore than something as important as assembling the freaking Triforce. One of the more interesting pieces, though, is in the private cabana. We get the title deed to it from the teacher on Windfall Island, and then have to explore a small maze. This is pretty memorable and much more interesting than just fighting waves and waves of the same enemies. Lo and behold, one of the charts and actual pieces is on Outset Island, right where we start, and that's pretty cool knowing that a hunk of the Triforce was just sitting there at the very beginning of the game. Once we finally assemble the Triforce, it's on to the final area. We've made it. We head back to the Tower of the Gods and sink down to Hyrule one last time. We see that Ganon has wreaked havoc and stolen the princess. Immediately, we're met with a challenging fight with 2 Dark Nuts, and this is the closest I came to death at this point by far, so far in the game. These guys hit hard. They are a signal that you are at the end game now. After this, we break the barrier, briefly traverse Hyrule Field, and enter Ganon's Tower. The tower is fairly lengthy in this game, which is why I think it's deserving of its own phase in this video. The last major phase is just getting the Triforce and beating Ganon, but I figured I'd split the two up here just for the sake of pacing. So our first challenge is to go through 4 small sections similar to each of the major dungeons. The Tower of the Gods is absent from this segment, thus further proving that it's kind of the oddball of the dungeons, though it still does remain my favorite. We fight all the bosses again, Mega Man style. However, what's lame about this part is that they limit your items to those that you had at the real part of the game. I want to see what happens if I attack Goma with the hookshot. Sadly, I can't do that. Also, you have way more hearts and a more powerful sword, so it just doesn't work all that well. After this segment though, we are really getting to it. We have to defeat Phantom Ganon once and for all first. We play some more tennis with him, and then the hilt of his sword dramatically falls towards where we need to go next. You do this over and over and over again until you eventually get the light arrows, one of the coolest weapons ever. You one-shot kill literally anything now, even Dark Nuts with full armor. So we hit the stupid Phantom with one and he's toast. Now it's time to go save Zelda. We start off with another diversion, and possibly the most horrifying cutscene in any game rated E. Thank goodness I never actually beat Wind Waker when I was like young, because I mean this game used to scare me just in like the Forsaken Fortress. Had I seen this cutscene when I was a kid, I would have been terrified, and there's no way I would have continued playing anyway. Puppet Ganon can be a little difficult. Mostly just annoying to try and hit the blue crystal on his tail with a light arrow a total of 9 times between 3 different forms. The third form is a huge pain, and I had to finally drink my soup to get my magic back after whiffing so many times. I took the second helping of soup to make sure I had my bottle ready for the fairy that you get before the real fight with Ganon. Again, only one bottle, less than 10 hearts. Still, even with these self-imposed challenges, I never died this entire run. Ganon definitely got me close, and the Dark Nuts in Hyrule Castle gave me some issues, but I never even needed to use that fairy. My soup consumption also was for magic more than for hearts. So perhaps my next run of this game will have to be limited to 3 hearts because it's just pretty easy. Anyways, the Ganon fight in this game is really fun. We get to take advantage of the parry ability once again, just like fighting Dark Nuts. The music is incredible, one of my favorite final boss themes. Then, for the final hit, we do an alley-oop with Zelda, where she lobs us the light arrow and we go for the slam dunk on Ganon's head. Basketball metaphors aside, this final hit is really intense. Link does this scream that you never hear anywhere else in the game to my knowledge. Look, I know for the most part I don't have the sound effects playing during these videos, but for hours and hours and hours you just hear Link yelling all the damn time like this. So to hear something different come from him really shows that all that other stuff was just business as usual, but this time it was personal. And well, that does it. That's Wind Waker. It's by far the longest game I've covered on this channel so far, and I really do appreciate you all for being patient in the time it took me to complete this video. Overall, even playing on what is considered an inferior version by today's standards, I still have an immensely fun time with this game. There's certain things that I may roll my eyes at knowing that they were fixed in the HD version, but it's still an incredible game. So with that, let's discuss the aspects of Wind Waker outside of just how it plays. After all that, you might be thinking, can it actually get any better? Well, apparently Nintendo thought so when they made Wind Waker HD. They did not make a ton of changes, but rather several small ones and one big alteration. We don't have to equip the Wind Waker for starters. In the early stages of the game, it's not a big deal at all to have to do this, but half your time in the Wind Temple is spent in the pause menu because you only have 3 item slots. Instead, the Wind Waker is now always equipped via up on the D-pad. The game also made the Great Sea a lot less tedious through the introduction of the Swift Sail. It's an upgrade for the King of Red Lions that allows us to go fast and always have the wind at our back. It's nice, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to make some hot take that the Swift Sail is a bad thing. However, life without it isn't unbearable by any means. Changing the wind is just part of the game, and sure, the sailing can feel slow, but that's when you sip your coffee and enjoy the scenery. There's other quality of life upgrades. Instead of starting with a 200 rupee wallet, it's 500. When you pull out the bombs on the boat, you get a little arc showing your trajectory. Here's some footage of me struggling immensely to tell where the hell my bombs are going to land on the GameCube version, so it is helpful. Of course, since the update is on the Wii U, the gamepad is helpful in displaying information that you would otherwise have to pause the game to see. There's other stuff too, but the point is to just highlight that a lot of minor changes were made to fine-tune the game, despite it being damn near perfect in the first place. The big modification, though, was in the Triforce quest. Instead of needing to decipher 8 charts, now it's just 3. The locations of the other 5 charts just simply give you the shards themselves. It limits your need for rupees from 3,200 down to about 1,200. That right there might be a deal breaker for most people, and I totally understand it. I remember how much better that whole part of the game felt without needing 3,200 rupees. Again, I don't mind it these days, but upon first playing the remaster, I could really feel the difference. There's more to games than just the gameplay and minor tweaks to the quality of life, though. So for our next segment, we will discuss the magnificent audio and visual presentation of Wind Waker. I've mentioned the concept of Nintendo love or Nintendo polish before when discussing visuals, and there are so many GameCube games where you can see it. Wind Waker still looks good today on its original version. Granted, I am playing in 480p with the usage of this trusty little adapter, so what you're seeing is definitely an improvement over using traditional video cables. However, besides that technicality, the art style itself is what has made this game age so well. I'm a huge sucker for cell shading. Games like Jet Grind Radio and Wind Waker stand out as some of the most visually appealing games of my entire childhood. Wind Waker took an interesting direction with the soundtrack. There are some songs that really stand out and are memorable, like The Great Sea and Dragon Roost Island. Everybody talks about those. However, a lot of the music is very minimalistic. Some of the dungeons hardly even have music, and when you hear it, you wonder if it's some kind of environmental effect or something from an enemy. Just listen to the music in the Forbidden Woods. The temples and the Tower of the Gods have slightly more involved tracks. I know many people say the Earth Temple theme is one of the scariest Zelda songs ever made. I kind of dig it. I love the weird chants or screams or whatever you hear during it. It's really unsettling, but it fits the tone so well. The Wind Temple also does really have an incredible theme, but that's only when you can actually hear it. I don't know what it is, but it just feels like we would have benefited from somebody cranking the tunes a little higher sometimes. The guitar part in the Wind Temple theme is actually really charming. Pair that then with some of the more ominous background sounds, and we have an excellent dissonance that makes you understand the magnitude of the game's last major dungeon before Ganon. Perhaps another time we're going to have to do another video about Wind Waker where we focus more and more on just the audio presentation. Alright, all that being said, let's focus on the major question. Are we really losing out in the audio department by playing the GameCube version? You can hear some slight differences in the music between the two versions for sure, but overall no. I don't think you're really missing anything. You won't particularly notice the difference. Like I said, half the time the music is so far in the background it doesn't matter at all. The tracks that are more present hit as hard as they always have, and I'll never get enough of The Great Sea. Visually, it's just up to preference. Do you like all that extra lighting and stuff that they did? I mean, it looked awesome when they first showed it, but I know there's a group of people who don't like the HD lighting when comparing it to the regular version. So I don't really have a preference. Maybe I would say the HD version, but again, it's not a deal breaker for me. So let's talk about actually acquiring the ability to play Wind Waker HD. When I was in high school, the Wii U was the premier Nintendo console. I look back on those years as some of the most disappointing times to be a Nintendo fan. One of the very few happy days I had as a Wii U owner was the day Wind Waker HD came out. Think about that, a GameCube game is one of the happiest days I had as a Wii U owner. But anyway, I remember pre-ordering the version with the Ganondorf figurine and even getting that hardcover strategy guide. In time, I finished the remaster. Then later I took turns with a friend playing the new Hero mode on the game. With that, I would deem myself fairly familiar with the HD remaster, despite not having it anymore. So yeah, here's the caveat. Several years ago, I moved across the country, and hauling a huge game collection with me made no sense. I had to make some tough decisions. One of the last things I sold off was my Wii U and my copy of Wind Waker HD. However, there was never a question of selling off the GameCube. I have kept that my entire life. So nowadays I only have the GameCube version of Wind Waker, and that's how this whole question came up. Is it worth buying a Wii U again, just so I can play Wind Waker HD again? Most of the Wii U's library has been ported to the Switch, but this game is one of the few left stranded. So with that context, understand that you're seeing footage exclusively from the GameCube, but I am very familiar with the Wii U version as well. I bring up all this background because I figure at least some of you are in a similar situation. You have a GameCube or a Wii, and you don't currently own a Wii U or never did. So if you're in the same boat, welcome. If not, then perhaps you have the console, the game, or both. Well, this discussion still applies because maybe you've considered selling off those items. Or maybe you're sitting here wondering, why the hell did I ever buy a Wii U? I thought that almost every day between the years of 2013 and 2017. Anyways, the pricing of the consoles and the games does have a significant impact on the practicality of buying a Wii U and Wind Waker HD. And yes, before you write the comment, I know emulators exist. However, some people like owning the real deal, and this discussion is intended for those who value physical ownership. If you emulate these games, more power to you, but it's not something that I like doing. The rest of the video where we broke down the gameplay, audio, and visuals still applies, of course, since that has nothing to do with the price. Overall, the price of entry does impact my decision to rebuy this console and game significantly. Thankfully, I've owned the GameCube version since I was like 7 years old, because the price on it is not something I want to be paying nowadays for a single game. The same goes with the idea of buying a Wii U just for Wind Waker HD. Sure, the consoles aren't too bad in the grand scheme. I mean, it's not like I'm trying to buy an Atari Jaguar here. However, it's still a little too steep, and the game itself is also far from low cost. So now we've covered just about everything. Wind Waker on the GameCube still has a lot to offer, but its HD counterpart took something already amazing and made additional improvements to it. So I'll give you my closing thoughts in our last segment. In general, there's only a few reasons why you would opt for the GameCube version over the Wii U. If you're like me, you're too stubborn to emulate, you only have the GameCube version, and the last thing you feel like doing is buying a Wii U in 2025, so you just deal with it. If you don't enjoy the updated visuals of the HD version, and perhaps you prefer the look of the GameCube one more, then by all means, play the GameCube version. Or if you're just really curious to experience the insanity of having to get 3,200 rupees for the Triforce quest and not having, the good quality of life stuff like the bomb arc or whatever, then go ahead, play the GameCube version. Wind Waker is still a phenomenal game, even if you forget about the fact that there's a better edition of it out there. But in today's world, there is a better option. I'll just note that I had a great time replaying it as much as always, despite the long Triforce quest. To appeal to a modern audience, the changes made to Wind Waker HD were very necessary. However, I don't think they make the GameCube version completely unplayable. I just can't justify buying a Wii U again for this game alone when I already own it for the GameCube. Did they take an already amazing game and make it essentially perfect? Yes. But that's the bottom line. Wind Waker is incredible foundationally. Literally everything is just so fun about this game. The combat is fun, the items are fun, the characters are fun, the Great Sea is fun, the dungeons are fun, the side quests are fun, playing the Wind Waker is fun, you get the idea. I just like this game a lot, alright? I just like it a lot. Ultimately, I don't see myself ever rebuying a Wii U just to play Wind Waker HD. I know Twilight Princess HD is also stuck in the same hell of being trapped on the Wii U, but I never really cared for or played that game's HD remake. Now look, if we're talking about games like Nintendo Land or Wii Party U, then yeah, I might be buying a Wii U just for those. However, if Wind Waker HD were on the Switch, a console that a lot of people do own, including myself, it would be a no-brainer, and this video probably wouldn't even exist. But until that happens, I'm going to be sticking with my GameCube version that I've owned since I was like 7 years old on Christmas Day. So with that, thanks for watching.